Okay, welcome back to the class. Today I will give you a very some good understanding and concise and simple understandings on the competitiveness and competitive advantage as the conceptual basis for competitive strategies design. So when we talk about competitive strategy, uh, we do want to create some competitive advantage, hopefully. But that competitive advantages also come from uh, uh, the competitiveness. So, which is really the potentials of competitive advantage, and we can call it competitiveness. So, the difference between competitiveness and competitive advantages, therefore, can be in the sense of your ness, right? Your abilities, your abilities to compete. Okay, it doesn't manifest in terms of the forms of, of the advantages that you create, but it does manifest the potentiality, the capabilities of your competitive advantage, and that is where your competitiveness is. So competitiveness are embedded in everything that you do, that you feel that you can, if you restructure it properly and put into organized activities, your value chain, your business models, and your supply chain management and your operations, that competitiveness will therefore turn into competitive advantage. So therefore, being a potentials for competitive advantages, competitiveness is not everything that matters, but without your ability to compete and everything that matters is much harder to achieve. Right? That is the key issue, key point, right? So you really have to put some investment and some strategic understanding and invest your budgets on all your operations and activities that it allows you to be able to generate the ability to differentiate from other people, so that the customers will continue to visit you, and the suppliers will continue to be a part of willing to be a part of your supply chain and things like that. So competitiveness is not everything that matters, but without it, everything matters is much harder to achieve. It's competitiveness. We know that fundamentally something that you are doing that allow you to generate the potentials of competitive advantage. That is the competitiveness, but it is because organizations are not so straightforward. It is combinations of individuals and the groups and all the activities being organized to in view of in the context of the relative to certain uh, opportunities and trends. So so being competitive and having that competitiveness in your operations and supply chains and business ecologies and the competencies really need you to integrate all these different levels. So you need a very systematic interaction and engagement at different levels in order to gain the competitiveness of your business. So competitiveness often is a result, therefore, of the interactions between different levels. Obviously, since the very beginnings, we already talked about it, and the micro level, right, which is the individual competencies level, the issues of your the emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, the sociological intelligence, or psychological issues, sociological perspective of your organization. From the individual perspective, right? Empathy and ability to listen to the voices of the customers and translate them into operational requirements, which I have already explained it in quality function deployment to house the qualities and innovations management that like in another YouTubes we talk about the innovations value change rather than just the operational value change, and that innovation value change from ideas generations to ideas diffusions to impact a broader market systematically with the knowledge supporting and enabling and the attitude of the organization supporting and driving it. That kind of individuals competencies are very powerful and very important, and they becomes necessary requirements for competitiveness. And we are also need to bring that individual perspective into Meso Level, which is organizational processes. And we have already talked about 5S, and we already talked about how we can improve in a systematically improve and leapfrog the productivities of that 5S operation system. Input, process, output, and there are a whole set of the organizational and strategic operational supply chain management theories, such as institutional theories, the resource dependency theory, resource-based view, dynamic capability, transactions economics theory, and agency theory, signaling theories, blah, 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 right? All this Meso Level, the organizational processes that, for instance, looking into the strategic deployment of deployment processes of how you deploy and how you develop your innovative ideas and your transform your organizational resources, available resources, whether it's capitals or intellectual capital to something that is organized that allow you to gain sustainable competitive advantage, which is your supply chains and operations processes and business model. And many times we compete on business models rather than on product and services. So business models are very important. It is a holistic way of your ability to get your values produced and delivered and across to the organization. To the business, to the market, very uniquely. Okay, and so these are very important business model concepts. For instance, many times before we were selling, and like Honeywells are selling product and things like that, like thermometers and chillers and maybe the control systems, but then slowly they can change the business model to be more service oriented, and maybe with the incorporations of IoT, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence, they will reshift their business model to a more intelligence level. And so with that, competitiveness rooted in individuals and Meso Level is not sufficient, because business, we need to be pragmatic in dealing with what is competitiveness. What is competitiveness is not what you say, it is what you say that is meaningful to the market, and that is where ambiguity making sense, and that is where the agilities making sense in the way of you reacting to the macro environment. And one of the macro environment is which I've already discussed in institutional theory, and another one is of course customers. The organization is situated within a broader industry, national structures. Also, we could have many different types of national compliance rules and regulations, national cultures, even our the national culture, infrastructures, industry infrastructures, cultures, economic forces, and things like that, that can shape your behavior and strategies of organizations, which we clearly have seen also from the Michael Porter's diamonds model, right? That is the factors conditioning, the market conditioning, the strategies of the organizations, or strategies of rivalry, combinations of all the organizations plus all the supporting infrastructures, and viewed also on from the perspective and the support of the government and opportunity in chances. So also these are very important macro levels competitiveness driving force. And when we make use of all these actions and activities, and we know that they have the potential to deliver competitive advantage, but then we have to make it happen. If something that is potential is not realized, then it's not delivering the competitive advantage. So competitive advantage really, strictly speaking, it's you really need to do so many things, execute it well, and so that you can have certain competitive advantage. So that executions provide evidences of where your competitive advantages are. It could be at many times, to look at the competitive advantage is quite difficult to really understand, because sometimes what we really look at the competitive advantage, we think it is the competitive advantage, but sometimes it could be just the sources of competitive advantage coming from resources, coming from capabilities, coming from competencies. But at the end of the day, all these sources of competitive advantage do manifest in certain advantages, in the sense of your profitabilities are better than everybody else in the industries, or the market mostly prefer your product and services rather than others, things like that. And you have the ability to gain cost advantages, and you have the ability to gain some differentiations, images, and advantages, so that it can have more premium pricings and things like that. So this are what Michael Porter's talk about, the competitive advantage in the sense of differentiation and cost leadership, which is a very generic competitive advantages, which come from all kinds of sources, right? The resources and things like that. But again, if you really go a little bit more details and pragmatically go into the detail, cost leadership is not that easy, because leaders usually means only one, right? And a lot of followers. So it's very difficult to be really cost leaders, because once you are a cost leader, it means that you are so good and efficient in your operations that you therefore can charge a very good price, low price, lowest price, and nobody else can compete with you. Everybody else compete with you on the price, they will die, because they cannot have sufficient margins to operate, right? And so you have that margins advantages, and that is where competitive advantage come from. Okay, and otherwise you have to look into the competitive advantages come from your differentiation, and many times you cannot differentiate. The differentiations keep on shifting ground. The battlefield is very intensive, and it's keep on shifting your ground. And before we come up with a good product and core product such as mobile, and then okay, we have competitive advantage, but then slowly everybody can produce the mobile phone. So it does, the core product does not have the competitive advantage. So therefore you have to, maybe the core product, maybe the mobile, because the customers also gaining a lot of experiences and things like that. So they start to form some expectation. So you have to meet that expectation. So expected product becomes another area of competency, a competitive advantage differentiation. But then again, everybody can do that, and the expectations, we meet the expectations, the requirement of the customers' needs and interests and requirements, and everybody else can meet that. So it's slowly, you need to do some additional work on top of the expected product, from the core product to the expected product to the augmented product, and some services that you need to do, or some additional crowd crowd features on your mobile phone, or your mobile phone's ability to interact with other devices and sensors at home, and then slowly and maybe as your payment system, and generate more into a larger some innovative potential ideas of differentiation. So again, not a really straightforward manner. So please, be creative in your marketing strategies, in your operation strategies, in your concepts and implementations of competitive advantage. Okay. Fundamentally, we have already appreciated and learned a lot from my professors, our reputable Harvard Business School professors, Michael Porter. So we know what we should do and what we can do about it. And there are a lot of ways we can generate competitive advantage from Michael Porter's discussions in terms of economies of scale, in terms of policy choices. For example, if your companies make a policy that we got to differentiate, or we're gonna be cost leadership, and that policies choices of a company as an institutions, which we have already talked about in input, process, output to operations management, supply chain management, that would drive competitive advantage as well. So the sources of competitive advantage could come from policy choices, could come from your economies of scale, and it could come from your experience, and so on and so forth. Okay, so again, I'm just trying to say that try to strike a difference between. Sometimes it's very difficult to see between sources of competitive advantage and the real competitive advantage, but you already have some sense, right? That relatively to some market competitors, you possess that competitive advantage in terms of performance, in terms of your brand, in terms of your brand recognitions, in terms of your differentiation, in terms of your costing structures and things like that. But otherwise, there are many ways that can generate competitive advantage. It could generate sources of competitive advantage, which you can generate a lot from action. You can generate the actions that produce the economic value. You can generate a lot of value creating strategies, sustainable edge over drivers, and are part of the competitive advantage. So all this you can look into by yourself, and the ability to neutralize strengths becomes very important. So Porter's, we have already talked about it. So so he argues that competitive advantage grows fundamentally out of a value that the companies can create for the customers that exceed the company's cost structures. I mean, the ability to the cost to produce it. So sometimes you need innovative ideas in order to have that competitive advantage, right? In order to get that sufficient, robust margins, because nowadays the competitions are very high, and competitors can easily do some technological investments and will disturb your margins, right? And so that you're losing your competitive edge. Such as IKEA was able to provide some innovative product ideas, and which simplify until a way that supplier can produce them easily, and transportations can ship easily and in a cost efficient manner. And customers are also capable, able to install the furnitures relatively easy, and with all kind of furnitures they want, and in a standardized, robust quality manner. So all these are really nothing but, fundamentally it's really nothing but profit. Which is top line and bottom line, which is revenues minus your profit, your bottom line, your cost, right? So competitive strategy, in that sense, is as justified, is generic in the sense, but generic is so generic. It doesn't mean that that everybody can create it. No. as I already told you, if you fundamentally look into the performance structures, financial performance structures of organizations, of all your strategy, you know that there is a revenue on the top line, which is the things that you really need to do in order to create that top line, the revenue stream. And then you blah, 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 all the costs minus all the costs, all the way that you contribute to the society through interest rate, to your payments to the employees and cost of goods sold, and all the way down until you get to the bottoms of your net profit. And so it is very generic, right? Very generic, okay? Very general, but then it's very difficult. Just like to bring up the margin of the cost effectiveness of your and ability to pull your like a rubber band, your revenues, and you pull your rubber band, stretching it, your revenues up, your cost down. And it's not easy. You need innovation, you need integration of your supply chain, you need to restructure your logistics infrastructure, you need to look into how you operate your businesses, and so never straightforward. So but it is generic. So competitive strategy as defined is generic, and it can be contributed to how we position within our a favorable industry structure. Okay, as I already explained, low cost or differentiation in the broader market or niche market also you can do. Okay, and so now I hope that you already get some picture. And the more you grow, the more if you look into the isoquant, data physical isoquant, and or the capital, the levels isoquant, or in another way of the experience economy of scale. So the more you grow your market share, the more you need to expand on your units of production. And the more you do that, the cost goes down. And competitively, cost-wise, you have the advantage. And the more you produce, the more you gain your experience. And the more you become more innovative, the more you become more able to create, and even maybe because you have sufficient cash, you can probably invest more machinery and technology to disrupt and to help accelerate to disrupt the market, or to lead or to invest on your build strategies rather than hold strategies, defensive strategy, or put on investments on offensive strategy. So you try to build, grow your market, grow your product, grow your whatever, and rather than hold it and steal, right? And those people who are not able to hold it and not even to grow it, and maybe they will dying, and then eventually they need to harvest and maybe go somewhere else. So under that situation, firm size does count, because firm size gives voices, gives productivities, gives cost benefits and differentiations and innovation, which I have just explained, right? So this is competitive advantage really come from many different angles, okay, and things like that. And then competitive advantage, we need to master and exploit our environment, and that is where we have repeated again and again in whether it's through the 5S operation systems, the institution, on the structure strategy, structure, behaviors, and performance structure models of competitive strategy management that I have explained to you. So everything really depends pragmatically on our external business environment. External business environment give us the opportunity, and impose certain threat, and they are the sources of their paying us the money, paying us a transaction, right? And they are also the sources of our intellectual capital. There are sources of our financial capital, and there are sources of locations where we need to locate. Okay, and so we need to be able to explore where the feasible external environment and how we exploit it. And so we change the environment. If we can change the environment, or we let the environment change us. So it is there are red ocean strategies, blue ocean strategies in that perspective. And how the company position itself in the market becomes very, very important. You're going to position yourself as uh, always be innovative, or are you going to position yourself as always the follower, or are you going to position yourself as just something very uniquely niche in certain area, in certain geographical areas, such as only the halal food, or some special dishes, or some special things, or maybe it's through channel distribution of your unique channel distribution that you only sell through internet, or you only sell through application, or you only sell through whatever. So all this really depends on your positioning. Okay, so very important, and the qualities of your positioning allow you to take advantage. Okay, being a leader, right, and allow you positioning, allow you to be implanting a concept. And sometimes not only positioning of your business, but in terms of positioning your product, right? Like for example, toothpaste of Crest, the word Crest would be positioning in the minds of consumers, customers, as ability to fight the bacteria or things like that. So maybe certain, so certain types of product, if you positioning well, it will very, very powerful. Such as if you go to certain universities, they have positioning themselves through their brand, like MIT brand, Harvard Business School. I mean, it's some very unique university, right? And that unique positioning cognitively, conceptually influences and touches emotion of every consumer. That's where competitive advantage are. And fundamentally, in operations, we are talking about how we're going to utilize our resources, how we're going to utilize our resources, and the way we utilize our resources could be our, do you have the capability to utilize them? And that capability is to be able to utilize them. And once if your capability to utilize them, then you have to manage it, coordinate it, right? And until a point where you can deliver a certain shape of your businesses. That is where the business competencies comes into the picture. So you're capable of doing so many things, but then you have to organize it to be competent in the competency sense, to be able to deliver something such as that your businesses will be able to differentiate yourself in wine making. Okay, and it's very unique wine, and very unique taste, and that also spend less cost in doing it, and that kind of competencies you need to structure it through your capability. So you're capable of making wine, but it doesn't mean that you're competent to deliver in a way that will be able to compete with the competitors in the market. And that competencies really is to make use of your capability in an organized way. Okay, and all of those depends on your resources, and resources can be transformed resources and transforming resources. Transforming resources are your equipments, your technologies, you yourself, and the resources are therefore just the raw materials, or the people, or the things that you need to process them, right? And the resource-based view, we have already talked about it. Resource-based view, the resources could be your transforming resources, transform resources, and all this. You use your processes and your capability and your knowledge asset and informations to help you transform all your raw material to something very useful, fit for purposes, quality control or quality management. So they includes all these important resources, attributes that enable you to formulate and implement strategy effectively, efficiently. So therefore, if you look at ability to utilize the resources as a business competency, without that, without these resources, without the capabilities of ambidexterity, you're not able to sense opportunity. So you're not able to drive and implement your strategy efficiently. If you do not know the knowledge of 5S, you're not able to implement a strategy that make use of 5S. So business competency and strategies are, as I told you, two sides of the same coin. Either one can drive the others. You can have strategy driving the competency, you have the competency driving the strategy, and so on and so forth. And one without the others makes no sense. Okay, I mean, not sustainable. And again, sometimes we need competencies because if you do not look into the competencies, such as something is very important to you, core competencies of your organization, then you tend to only react to the opportunity and threat of the market. So your strategies tend to be very temporary, tend to be temporal, tend to be adapting to the organizational environment, I mean the market environment. And that is one of the debate and one of the reasons why people need another side of the coin, which is more stable. So business competencies, especially the core competency, because something is core, that means that you already identify and differentiate that you're going to help you deliver the value to the best of the best. Okay, and so you already identify, invest money on it, and that is something that it can help you sustain for a longer period of time. That stability, rather than reacting up and down to the environment, and that is the strategy. And that so therefore business competency is a little bit more stable in the sense, and so that's why we need stability and agility, okay, in terms of your strategy, right? So because strategy is concept, your brain, right? And business competency is activities. And so these activities are more structured. You invest money on it, and there are more robustly structural sense. Although you can put some flexible structure in that, and turn the structure processes a little bit more dynamic, but again, they are not as dynamic as the concepts. Concept you can twist and turns. You can immediately flip over it immediately in the second. You can say, let's do it. Conceptually do it, and okay, based on your competency. So strategy is more agile in that sense, and so therefore it's more fluid in that sense. So we need a more robust, stable sense of business competency. So anyway, I hope you know the two sides of the same coin, things like that. But in that perspective, it's not two sides of the same coin, because a coin is a coin, right? The two sides still behaving the same thing, right? But they are not, right? A strategy in large organizations involve achieving balance between your exploitations and exploration. So you need to also really need to look into, in view of your vision, in view of the environmental changes, in view of your ability to sustain your performances, in view of your ability to sustain cash flow, the cash flows and balance sheet, and profit and loss, and all these statements, and you need to really know how to exploit whichever you have now, leverage it to the best, to the extreme point, so that you can create the most return, right? And so otherwise you're wasting your return on investment, because you're wasting your time. You're supposed to return it today, but you're not making use of it today, so that a lot of your financials are being wasted because you conceptually not looking at it, or competency wise you are not using it. So exploitations of current resources forcing you to master all this issue, and developing, exploring for new opportunity, and explore for new ideas, new resources, how you're gonna do it. Okay, for example, Singapore has managed the waters very well, salt waters very well, and they even almost recycles all the national water. And so they have to cost, I think, I'm not so sure how many percent, but I'm sure it's very high, 90-80%. And so slowly they can sustain their competitive advantage. And the way they do is they have to exploit whichever they have now, technology they have now, and find new technologies in order to and then figure it out. For example, the every nation, every soil, right, underneath are the water reservoir. Okay, so maybe they sit on top of the water flowing underneath, right? Oh, anyway, all these are exploitations of current resources and developing of resources. And another hand is that if you have sufficient money in business sense, then sometimes instead of you develop your I mean, especially those core competencies, you need to really develop it slowly. If you can buy it, then it's not something core. Okay, that means that you can easily buy it, and everybody else can easily buy. So, but other than that, there are a lot more you can acquire. So, right, you can acquire acquisitions of another businesses is through the purchase, which is really the purchase of abundance of resources in an imperfect market. And if that is so, that acquisitions of businesses could be acquiring all the businesses, not the resources itself. Acquiring, get the all resources back into your hand. Yes, that can be with modification extensions turning into your core competencies, right? So you can extend your competencies from one area to additional bundles types of area, right? So from internet operations to maybe mobile payment. So you acquire a company with the mobile payments, and then maybe you acquire another company with app application and things like that. So basing the purchase decisions on a very rare resource provide the greatest probability of maximizing your market imperfection, and therefore leading to a return, high returns on your financials performances, right? So something that is imperfect market, and you are able to obtain that resources will give you the probabilities of winning highest returns. And if you can go to Google's and databases, you should be able to find the pioneers of the resource-based views, Professor Barney, and he did a very good job guiding us and teaching us, and with how we can apply and conceptualize resources and operations and business competencies in a competitive advantage concept level. And so he basically has given us a VRIO and VRINO, which I have already explained it to you. You can go back time. And so rather than spending times identifying the environmental conditions like the five process or the pestle analysis and trying to fit in right, adapting to it, we rather put investments on something is that we can control more endogenously, controlling it and more able to control it, right? And so that will give us the stability which I have just explained, and that is where the root ideologies of business resource view is, RBV is. So RBV leveraging the internal strength in that sense to take control of the opportunity in the external environment, and of course ability to neutralize the threat, and that becomes a very core important valuable resources and business competencies that if you follow in that direction, then you're progressing along the ability to be core. So that is a very fundamental requirement, basic requirement. Theoretical matter, the resource-based view starts with a couple of the assumptions. Number one is we know that industries are diversify. Every CEO is different, every managers are different, everyone runs in different technologies, everyone runs with the different capability. So we therefore have heterogeneous heterogeneities in terms of resources. Everybody's resources are different, and that is the reasons why we can be different. That's why the resource-based view can be different. So we can get competitive advantage starting from the resources and business competency level that can help us. If we make use of it, then we drive it. If we make use of it to generate the product and services and produce the product and services, then we will gain a lot of competitive advantage, such as being the first mover, being the first one in the market. And being the first one in the market generates a lot of benefits, right? We are the first one in the market, people get the first conception, right? So first one in markets like Coca-Cola, so everybody think about Coca-Cola after that. And so if somebody else want to compete with it, they're still thinking of Coca-Cola. So if you want to think about the airplanes, they still cannot eliminate the Boeing, right? And so you gotta be the so the ability to masters your competencies gives you the advantages of the competitive advantages. One of them is manifested through the first mover, right? And the second one is that the resources may not be perfectly mobile across companies. So meaning that there is certain, if you want to move one resources from one end, from one company to another company, is not that straightforward. If you want to move resources from, for example, the manufacturing base in China to somewhere else, and it's not that straightforward. Especially China has a lot of intellectual capability in terms of the nuclear power plants and things like that. And so unless well, it's not just straightforward, but again, if they want to do business, they can standardize it, right? So and that is where globalizations, international companies are all about. The world global, world class global companies are all about. And so you really need to, like if as I told you, the standardization. So back to the standardizations, in the sense that those are very immobile. So there is a huge mobility barrier, but you can, if you want to do business, you can turn it standardization and then make sure that you create a good culture so that no one can easily buy your product, might buy your company's people and steal, right, with the patents and steal your product and services and practices and good manufacturing system, so that you can make use of it. So the 5S are very, very important areas or sources for competitive advantage. So if you go back to the YouTube that I discussed with you in terms of the 5S sorting in orders and set things in orders and all these sanitizations and standardizations and disciplines, and you will see by incorporating other types of theory, you will see that it is a very, very powerful sources of competitive advantage. However, not all resources have the potentials to create a sustained competitive advantage, and so you really have to look into the details. And some of the important resources that can help you get the competitive advantage are: number one, the resources have to be valuable to your companies and also to the customers, right? Some things that make sense to your company also need to make sense to the customers. I mean, the customers need to be able, as I already explained to you, the competitive advantage to come from the core. Before was coming from the core product, and then moving to the expected product, moving to the augmented product, moving to the potential product. So something that is value to your companies, that you allow you to sell to the market of your call to the market. It also need to be valuable to the market, right? And sometimes you need to transcend beyond the product and services. And so resources of value to the companies, it means allow the companies to exploit opportunity and neutralize threat. That is a fundamental competency. Again, back to competency. So competitive strategies come from the competency, the ability to exploit your opportunity and neutralize threats. Where the strategy is, the directions comes into this context. Resources, again, must be rare. The physical resources you have, transform resources you have, human capital, organization capital, all these are transforming resources that are rare for your company's operations now and for the future. So it is about the company's current futures and potential companies. Potential competition is where the core competency is rooted, because something is very core, allow you to sustain and continue your businesses for a long period of time. Okay, and that is where the company's current and potential competitions comes into the pictures as part of your competitive advantage. And so you can utilize all your resources in various different, you integrate all these different resources. Ability to integrate, coordinate the resources, integrate them is your capability. If you put it into a structured form, that becomes your business competency. And so resources, human capital. So business model is a good importance competency in the sense of ability to streamline and flow through all the way to the market. And so you make use of human, natural capitals, financial capital, intellectual capital through your organizational capital, which is your value chain. You turn it into target segments, and with a good acquisitions, a good reputations and branding, equity, and touching the relationship and the minds and hearts of the customers, you get the customers' capital. So you can see that the capital is the order plus. Okay, so if your company has competitive advantage, it really covers from it really make use of every single step of your business can be becoming your capital. So this page allows you to take root in like a finance system, take root in cultures and developing, exploiting everything to be your capital. buy capital means that you are in control to generate return. So you can generate returns from organizational capital. You can generate returns from your customer capital. You can generate returns because what it generates customers capital means like a external market externality that generate positive word of mouth, or they even, if I explain it to you, that if you use the data physical isoquants properly, you can incorporate the customers to be your value co-creator. And then slowly, and then through the iterative process of continuous improvements and organization development, renewal focus, and things like that, you can continue to maximize and transcend and transform your capital. So this business model becomes capitalization's model. So you can see that something that you think that you understand a business model, but and now suddenly we are turning them into capitalization. Everything is capital. It becomes intellectual capital, right? And which consists of customer capital, organization capitals, and human capital, natural, financial, intellectual capital, including your cultural capital, and all these capitalizations becomes the sources of a competitive advantage, right? So fund resources that are possessed by large number of companies are not something that give you a competitive advantage, and that means that easily they can copy and that easily they can purchase and so on and so forth. Okay, so they cannot be a source of a competitive advantage. It is also advantageous if the resources can generate competitive advantage or imperfectly imitable. That is people are not easily able to copy. Why they are not easy to copy? Sometimes it's because your company's cultures are different. Your company way of operating is different. The way you manage your ISO 9000 are different. The way you operate your businesses are different, and because all these differences creates different historical growth, and which is very difficult for people to from outside people to understand how you progress from one beginning. Like for example, IBM from where they were before until today's complex solution-based driven company, and so nobody can figure it out easily, and that historical uniqueness gives you the abilities of competitive advantage, because people cannot easily copy your historical growth, and intangible resources therefore becomes very important, right? So this and the link between the company resources and the sustainable competitive advantage is ambiguous, meaning that you do not know where. Sometimes even your own company do not know where exactly is your competitive advantage, and that is troublesome. But that means that there are a lot of, because organization is a system, right? It's a systems of activities. So and unless you are very sharp CEO and very sharp CEO with a systems knowledge, then you can see where are the cause and effect and how they integrate from one end to another end. The integrations of all the resources and capability and activities it's where the dynamic and system capabilities of organization, which is that's why the dynamic capabilities and the abilities, the capability becomes very important for a company, and they are sources of competitive advantage, right? With that capability, you can do so many things. You can create so many different types of business competencies. Competitive advantage flow from complex social processes, right? As I already told you in the historical growth, right? And there are different people's managing with each other's, interacting with each other, different knowledge managements, and so on and so forth. And so the changes in economic or industry conditions can change all this, whichever competitive advantage you have. So you can erode into your sources of competitive advantage. And therefore sustainability becomes a very difficult issue, and so you really have to innovate continuously and continuous improvement, right? And once you are able to do that, then you generate sustainable competitive advantage and generate the performances. Once you have the competitive advantage, then your performance comes. So your performance comes from your competitive advantage, which come from the sources of competitive advantage, integrating based on what I have just told you. So if you do that well, you will generate a lot of performances. And one of the performances is the strategic objective performances. So when we talk about strategic performances objective, we're talking about you again sufficient sales growth rate up to your expectation, market share, percentage of sales from new product, customer satisfactions, and so on and so forth that we have already learned from balanced scorecard. Okay, so financial objective that is different from your strategic objective, which would be you already familiar return on equity, sales, and asset. attainment of competitive advantage by a firm is therefore very important leading criteria for predicting strong organizational performances, as already explained to you. So if you want to create a strong performances of your organization, you got to be competitive advantage, which come from how you make use of your business competencies and competitive strategy that that integrates between the source potentials of your competitiveness, of your competitive advantage, which is competitiveness, all the way to competitive advantage. So that is very important. If you don't have that competitive advantage, that means that again, it is a predictor. It is a signal that your company is deteriorating in performances, and from there you really have to make a lot of adjustment. So the leadership supports and management systems for competitive strategy plus winning propositions we can discuss later. Okay, so our class will stop today.